It was a bright and sunny Saturday morning in Maple Grove. This was a super quiet little neighborhood where nothing fun or crazy ever seemed to happen, at least, that's what everyone thought. The houses were all neat and tidy, with green lawns and pretty flowers. Kids rode bikes down the street, and birds chirped in the trees. It was the kind of place where you'd expect everything to stay boring and normal forever. But guess what? Something big was about to shake things up, and it all started with one guy and his funny little lawn gnome. Let me introduce you to Jake Miller. Jake was a regular guy who liked simple things. He loved sitting on his porch with a hot cup of coffee, watching the world go by. He wasn't loud or flashy. He didn't cause trouble. He just wanted to chill out and enjoy his day. But the thing that made Jake really happy was his lawn gnome. Its name was Norman, and it wasn't like any other gnome you'd see. Norman had a big, pointy red hat that flopped over a little. He had a silly grin on his face, like he was laughing at a secret joke. And the best part? He held a tiny sign that said, "Mind your own beeswax." Jake thought it was the funniest thing ever. Every time he looked at Norman sitting in his front yard, he'd smile and laugh. It was his little buddy, making his day brighter. But not everyone thought Norman was so great. Across the street from Jake lived a lady named Karen Baxter. Now, Karen wasn't just any neighbor. She was the boss of the HOA, that's the group that makes rules for the neighborhood. Karen took her job very seriously. She always carried a clipboard, scribbling notes about who broke her rules. Her eyes were sharp, and her glare was so scary it could make a big grizzly bear run away. She walked around like she was the queen of Maple Grove, telling people what to do. Cut your grass shorter, she'd yell. Paint your mailbox blue, she'd demand. If your house didn't look perfect, Karen would be mad. And she was always watching. Jake. Oh, Karen didn't like him one bit. She thought he was a troublemaker. Why? Because he didn't follow her silly rules. He didn't care if his grass was a tiny bit too long. He didn't paint his mailbox the right color. And that gnome Norman? Karen hated it most of all. She thought it was ugly and dumb. To her, Jake was just a lazy guy who didn't belong in her perfect neighborhood. She'd stand on her porch, staring at his house, shaking her head. Sometimes she'd even yell across the street, "Get rid of that stupid gnome, Jake." But Jake? He'd just wave back with a big smile and keep sipping his coffee. He wasn't scared of Karen. Not even a little. Here's the funny thing, though Karen had no idea who Jake really was. She thought he was just some guy who liked to mess with her. She didn't know there was more to him, something big and surprising. And that little gnome, Norman. It wasn't just a decoration. It was about to change everything in Maple Grove. Karen's world was going to flip upside down, and she didn't even see it coming. Isn't that wild? Can you imagine how shocked she's going to be? Let's picture it for a second. It's a peaceful morning. The sun is shining, and Jake is out on his porch. He's wearing his favorite old t-shirt and sipping his coffee. Norman is sitting in the grass, smiling like always. Across the street, Karen is already awake, peeking out her window. She's got her clipboard ready, looking for something to complain about. She sees Norman and frowns. That thing has to go, she mutters to herself. She's already planning to make Jake's day miserable. But Jake? He's just chilling. He doesn't know it yet, but today is going to be anything but boring. Think about this: have you ever met someone who seemed super bossy, like Karen? Someone who thinks they're in charge of everything? That's what Karen was like. She loved telling people what to do. She thought she knew best. But Jake wasn't like the other neighbors. He didn't argue with her. He didn't get mad. He just did his own thing. And that drove Karen nuts. She couldn't stand that he didn't listen to her. Every day, she'd watch him and Norman, getting angrier and angrier. She didn't know it, but she was about to pick a fight with the wrong guy. So, what do you think? Was Karen making a big mistake messing with Jake? Was something sneaky hiding behind that goofy gnome? You'll have to stick around to find out, because this story is just getting started. Imagine Karen stomping over to Jake's house, ready to yell. Imagine Jake sitting there, calm as can be, with Norman by his side. What's going to happen next? Is Karen going to win, or is Jake going to surprise her? It's going to be a wild ride, and I promise you won't want to miss it. Let's set the scene a little more. Maple Grove was one of those places where everyone knew each other. The houses all looked kind of the same: white fences, green lawns, and little flower pots by the doors. Kids played outside, and dogs barked at squirrels. It was nice and quiet, the kind of place where you'd never expect a big adventure. But Jake's house stood out just a tiny bit. Not because it was fancy or weird, but because of Norman. That little gnome made people smile when they walked by, well, everyone except Karen. To her, it was like a big red flag waving in her face, saying, "I don't follow your rules." Karen had been the HOA boss for years. She loved being in charge. She'd walk up and down the street, checking every house. If your trash can was out too long, she'd leave a note. If your dog barked too much, she'd knock on your door. She thought she was keeping Maple Grove perfect. But really, a lot of people were tired of her. They just didn't say it out loud. Jake, though. He didn't care what she thought. He liked his gnome, and he wasn't going to move it just because Karen said so. That made her so mad she could hardly stand it. Here's the big question: was Karen about to get herself into trouble she couldn't handle? Was Jake more than just a guy with a funny gnome? You're going to love finding out. This sunny Saturday morning was about to turn into something no one in Maple Grove would ever forget. So grab a snack, get comfy, and let's keep going. What do you think happens next? Tell me in your head, or if you're feeling chatty, shout it out loud. Ready? Let's see how this crazy day unfolds. Karen Baxter was like a hawk circling over Jake's yard. She watched it every single day, her sharp eyes squinting at everything he did. She didn't miss a thing. But the one thing she hated most? That goofy lawn gnome, Norman. It sat there in Jake's front yard with its big red hat and silly grin, holding that tiny sign that said, "Mind your own beeswax." To Karen, it was the worst thing ever. She thought it was ugly and dumb. "It's tacky," she'd yell over the fence, her voice loud and mean. "This is a respectable neighborhood, Jake. We don't need junk like that." Jake didn't care what she said. He'd just lean back in his chair on the porch, wave at her with a big, friendly smile, and keep sipping his coffee. That made Karen even madder. She didn't like it when people ignored her. She was the HOA president, after all. She thought everyone should listen to her rules. But Jake? He wasn't scared of her yelling. He liked Norman, and he wasn't going to move it just because Karen didn't. Every time she shouted, he'd wave again, like it was no big deal. And oh boy, that drove Karen up the wall. One day, Karen couldn't take it anymore. It was a hot afternoon, and the sun was shining bright. Jake was outside watering his flowers, and Norman was sitting in the grass, smiling as usual. Karen peeked out her window and saw it. Her face got all scrunched up, like she'd just bitten a sour lemon. She grabbed her phone and marched right across the street. Her shoes clacked on the pavement, loud and fast. She was mad, really, really mad. When she got to Jake's yard, she stopped and pointed at Norman. "That's it," she snapped. "I've had enough of that ugly thing." Jake looked up from his watering can. He was calm, like always. "What's wrong now, Karen?" he asked, his voice nice and easy. But Karen wasn't in the mood for nice. She held up her phone and started recording him, like he was some kind of bad guy in a movie. "I'm warning you, Jake," she said, her voice shaking with anger. "I'm calling the cops if you don't ditch that stupid gnome right now. It's a disgrace." Jake didn't even blink. He just shrugged his shoulders and said, "Go ahead, Karen. Norman's not hurting anyone." Then he smiled again, that big, happy smile that made Karen so mad she could scream. And scream she did. Her face turned as red as a ripe tomato. She stomped her foot on the ground and started dialing 911 right there in Jake's yard. She held the phone to her ear and shouted, "Hello, police. Yes, I need help. There's a neighborhood disturbance at 123 Maple Street. It's terrible." Jake watched her, still holding his coffee mug. He didn't say a word. He just stood there, calm as could be, while Karen yelled into her phone. She waved her arms around, telling the police all about how Norman was ruining everything. "It's an eyesore," she said. "It's breaking all our rules. Someone needs to do something." She sounded like she was reporting a big crime, not a little gnome with a funny sign. Jake took a sip of his coffee and leaned against his porch railing. He didn't look worried at all. Why? Because something was going on that Karen didn't know about. Trouble was coming, but it wasn't the kind she thought. Let's picture this for a minute. Karen's standing there, her hair all messy from yelling so much. Her phone's pressed against her ear, and she's glaring at Jake like he's the worst person in the world. Norman's just sitting in the grass, looking silly and happy. The neighbors are starting to peek out their windows, wondering what's going on. They hear Karen shouting, and they see Jake smiling. It's like a big show right there on the street. But Karen doesn't notice the neighbors. She's too busy being mad. She thinks she's winning. She thinks the police are going to come and make Jake get rid of Norman. Oh, how wrong she is. See, Karen didn't know Jake at all. She thought he was just some lazy guy who liked to annoy her. She didn't know there was more to him, something secret, something surprising. And Norman? That little gnome wasn't just a decoration. It had a trick up its sleeve, or under its hat, I should say. Karen was so busy being angry that she didn't stop to think. Why was Jake so calm? Why didn't he care that she was calling the cops? If she'd paid attention, she might have figured out something was up. But nope. She just kept yelling, her voice echoing down the street. The air felt thick with tension. It was like a storm was about to hit Maple Grove, but not the rainy kind. This was a storm of trouble, and Karen was walking right into it. She thought she was in charge. She thought she could boss Jake around like she bossed everyone else. But Jake wasn't like the other neighbors. He didn't bow down to her. He didn't run away when she got mad. He just stood there, watching her make a big fuss. And that made Karen's anger grow bigger and bigger, like a balloon about to pop. Imagine if you were there, watching this happen. What would you think? Would you cheer for Jake, staying so cool and quiet? Or would you wonder why Karen was so upset about a little gnome? It's funny when you think about it, a grown-up lady fighting with a guy over a lawn decoration. But to Karen, it wasn't funny. It was serious. She wanted Norman gone, and she'd do anything to make it happen. Calling the cops was her big move. She thought it would scare Jake. She thought he'd finally listen to her. But Jake? He wasn't scared. Not even a little bit. The truth was, something was brewing, something Karen didn't expect. Trouble was already on its way, and it wasn't because of her phone call. Jake knew it, but he didn't say a word. He just let Karen keep going, let her think she was winning. It was like he was playing a game, and she didn't even know the rules. Can you feel it? The excitement building up? Something big is about to happen, and Karen's going to be so shocked she won't know what to do. So, there they were, Karen yelling, Jake smiling, and Norman sitting pretty. The neighborhood was quiet, but not for long. What was going to happen when the cops showed up? Would they take Karen's side, or was Jake hiding something that would turn it all around? You'll have to wait and see, because the story is getting wilder by the minute. Stick with me, and let's find out what happens next. The next day was Sunday, and Maple Grove was still buzzing from Karen's big fight with Jake. The sun was out, kids were playing, and everything seemed normal until a police car rolled down the street. Its lights weren't flashing, but it still made everyone stop and look. The car parked right in front of Jake's house. Karen was ready. She stood on her porch with her arms crossed tight, a big smirk on her face. She looked like she'd just won $1 million at the lottery. Finally, she said to herself. They're here to fix this mess. Out stepped Officer Daniels. He was a big guy, tall and strong, with a serious face that said he didn't mess around. He adjusted his hat and looked around, a little confused. He walked up to Karen's porch and said, ma'am, we got a call about a lawn gnome. He scratched his head like he wasn't sure he heard that right. A lawn gnome? Really? Karen didn't care that he looked puzzled. She jumped right in, pointing at Jake's yard like it was a crime scene. Yes, that's right, she shouted. Look at it. That ugly thing is breaking all our rules. It's against our standards. Do something about it. Jake was watching the whole thing from his front door. He leaned against the frame, his hands in his pockets, looking as relaxed as ever. Norman, that goofy gnome with the red hat and mind your own beeswax sign, sat in the grass nearby, smiling like nothing was wrong. Karen kept going, her voice loud and bossy. I told him to get rid of it, but he won't listen. This is a nice neighborhood, and he's ruining it. Officer Daniels listened, but he didn't say much. He just nodded a little, his face still serious. Now, here's where things start to get really good, like a juicy secret slipping out. Everyone thought Officer Daniels would pull out his little notepad and write Jake a ticket. Maybe he'd tell him to move Norman or pay a fine. That's what Karen wanted. She was sure she'd won. But guess what? Officer Daniels didn't do that. He didn't even frown at Jake. Instead, he turned away from Karen, walked right over to Jake's porch, and shook his hand. Yep, you heard that right, he gave Jake a big, friendly handshake, like they were old buddies. Karen's mouth dropped open so wide you could have fit a whole apple in there. Her eyes got huge, and she screeched, "What's going on?" She couldn't believe it. The cop was supposed to be on her side, not Jake's. She stomped her foot and waved her arms, looking madder than ever. Officer Daniels glanced back at her and said, "Ma'am, I suggest you calm down." His voice was firm, like he wasn't kidding. Karen blinked, confused. Calm down? Why wasn't he yelling at Jake? Why wasn't he doing what she wanted? Jake didn't say a word. He just stood there with a sly little grin on his face, like he knew something Karen didn't. And oh boy, did he ever. Karen was too busy freaking out to notice that grin. She didn't see how Jake's eyes twinkled, like he was holding a big surprise. And she definitely didn't see the second car pulling up down the street. This one was different. It wasn't a police car with lights and sirens. It was plain, with dark windows you couldn't see through. It stopped a little ways away, quiet and sneaky. Something big was coming, but Karen had no clue. She was too caught up in her own yelling. Let's picture it for a second. Karen's on her porch, her face all red and sweaty from shouting. She's pointing at Norman like it's the worst thing in the world. Officer Daniels is standing by Jake, shaking his hand like they're friends. The neighbors are peeking out again, whispering to each other. What's happening, they wonder. Why isn't the cop mad at Jake? And that unmarked car? It's just sitting there, waiting. The air feels funny, like something exciting is about to pop out and surprise everyone. Karen kept ranting. This is ridiculous, she yelled. I called you to fix this. That gnome has to go. But Officer Daniels didn't budge. He looked at her with that no-nonsense face and said, "Ma'am, we've got this under control." Under control? What did that mean? Karen didn't get it. She thought she was in charge. She thought the police would listen to her, the HOA boss. But something wasn't right. Why was Jake so calm? Why was the cop being nice to him? Here's a little hint: things were starting to unravel. Jake wasn't just some guy with a gnome. There was more to him, and it was peeking out bit by bit. Officer Daniels didn't act like Jake was in trouble. He acted like Jake was important. Karen didn't see it, but the neighbors did. They started whispering louder. Maybe Jake's not who we think, one said. Yeah, something's up, another agreed. Even the kids on their bikes stopped riding to watch. Everyone could feel it, something big was brewing. That unmarked car with the tinted windows. It didn't move, but it was there for a reason. No one got out yet, but it added to the mystery. Was it more police? Was it someone else? Karen didn't even notice it. She was too busy glaring at Jake and Officer Daniels. She crossed her arms again and huffed, "This isn't over, Jake. I'll call the city. I'll get that gnome gone." Jake just shrugged, his sly grin getting a tiny bit bigger. He didn't argue. He didn't need to. He knew something she didn't, and it was making her look silly. Think about this: have you ever seen someone get all worked up, only to find out they were wrong? That's what was happening to Karen. She thought she had the power. She thought she could boss everyone around. But little by little, the truth was sneaking out. Officer Daniels wasn't there to help her. He was there for something else, something tied to Jake. And Norman? That little gnome wasn't just sitting there to look funny. It had a secret, too. Can you guess what it might be? Don't worry, we'll find out soon. The tension was growing, like a rubber band stretching tighter and tighter. Karen was loud and mad, but Jake was quiet and cool. Officer Daniels stood between them, keeping things steady. And that mysterious car? It was a clue, a big one. Something huge was about to happen, and Karen was totally clueless. She kept yelling, but every word made her look more foolish. Jake watched it all, sipping his coffee like it was just another day. But it wasn't. It was the start of something wild. So, what's next? Why did the cop shake Jake's hand? What's with that sneaky car? You're going to love finding out. This story's heating up, and the surprises are just beginning. Stick around, because it's about to get even juicier. It was Monday morning in Maple Grove, and the sun was just coming up. The weekend had been wild with Karen's yelling and the cop showing up, but now things were about to get crazy. Karen Baxter was up early, madder than ever. She'd spent all night thinking about Jake and that goofy gnome, Norman. She wasn't going to let him win. No way. She grabbed her clipboard, put on her shoes, and marched across the street to Jake's house. Her face was red, and her eyes were burning with anger. She was ready to fight. When she got to Jake's door, she started banging on it with her fist. Bang. 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 Open up, Jake, she shouted. I'm done with your nonsense. I'm reporting you to the city today. That ugly gnome is history. Her voice was so loud the whole neighborhood could hear her. She kept banging, her clipboard shaking in her other hand. She thought she had the power. She thought she was going to scare Jake and make him get rid of Norman once and for all. The door creaked open slowly. Jake stood there, looking calm as always. He didn't say anything at first, just watched her with that little smile he always had. But this time, something was different. He wasn't alone. Behind him stood two guys in dark suits. They were tall and serious, with shiny badges clipped to their belts. The badges sparkled in the morning light, and they looked important like real police, but not the kind you see every day. Karen stopped banging. Her hand froze in the air. Her eyes got wide, and her mouth opened a little. Who are you?" she stammered, her voice shaking now. Jake took a step forward. He didn't yell or get mad. His voice was steady and clear, like he'd been waiting for this moment. "Karen," he said, "meet my friends from the police department. I've been working undercover for months, keeping an eye on this neighborhood." Karen blinked. Undercover? What did that mean? She didn't understand yet, but her stomach started to feel funny, like something bad was coming. Jake kept going. "That gnome you hate so much. It's not just a decoration. It's got a camera in it. And guess what it caught?" He pulled out his phone and held it up so Karen could see. On the screen was a video. It was dark, like it was filmed at night, but you could tell it was Maple Grove. There was Karen, sneaking around in her pajamas with a key in her hand. She was scratching cars, scratching them hard. The cars belonged to people who didn't follow her HOA rules. One had a mailbox she didn't like. Another had grass that was too long. The video showed her giggling to herself as she scratched mean lines into the paint. Karen's face went white. She looked like she'd seen a ghost. That's not me," she lied, but her voice was all wobbly. The two guys in suits stepped forward. One of them was big, with a deep voice. "Ma'am," he said, "you're under arrest for vandalism. Vandalism means wrecking stuff that doesn't belong to you," and Karen had been caught red-handed. The other guy pulled out handcuffs, and they clicked as he opened them. Karen's clipboard slipped from her hand and hit the ground with a loud clatter. She stared at it, then at Jake, then at the suits. "No," she yelled. "This is a mistake. I'm the HOA president. You can't do this." But they could, and they did. Turns out, the cops weren't there for Jake at all. They'd been watching Karen the whole time. Jake wasn't just some guy with a funny gnome. He was an undercover cop, hiding in plain sight. That's why he was so calm when Karen called 911. That's why Officer Daniels shook his hand. They were all in on it. Norman's camera had been recording everything, every mean thing Karen did when she thought no one was looking. She thought she was the boss, but Jake had been the real one keeping things safe. Let's picture this big moment. Karen's standing there, her hair messy from all her yelling. Her clipboard's on the ground, and her hands are shaking. Jake's in front of her, cool and quiet, with his phone still showing that video. The two guys in suits are ready to take her away. The neighbors are watching from their windows, their mouths open in shock. Kids on bikes stop riding and stare. Even the birds seemed to go quiet. It's like the whole world is holding its breath, waiting to see what happens next. Karen tried to talk her way out of it. "This is ridiculous," she shouted. "I'm the one who keeps this place nice. Jake's the troublemaker." But no one believed her anymore. The suits didn't even blink. "Ma'am, we've got the proof," one said. "You've been scratching cars for weeks. We've got it all on tape." Karen's eyes darted around, looking for a way to escape, but there was none. She was trapped, caught by Jake and his sneaky little gnome. Jake put his phone back in his pocket. "Karen," he said, "you should have left Norman alone." His voice wasn't mean, just matter of fact. He'd been watching her for months, waiting for the right time to show everyone who she really was. All those times she yelled at him. All those times she bossed people around. Jake had been collecting proof, and now it was over. Karen's big power trip was done. The suits grabbed her arms gently but firmly. "Let's go," one said. Karen squirmed and yelled, "You can't arrest me. I'm important." But they didn't listen. They started walking her toward their car, that unmarked one with the tinted windows from the day before. It all made sense now. That car wasn't random. It was part of Jake's plan. The neighbors started clapping quietly at first, then louder. They were happy to see Karen finally get what she deserved. Karen's face was a mix of mad and scared. She'd spent so long thinking she ruled Maple Grove, but she'd been wrong. Jake, the guy she called a troublemaker, was the real hero. And Norman? That little gnome with the red hat and silly sign? It was the star of the show. It had caught her being bad, and now everyone knew the truth. The cops weren't there to help Karen, they were there to stop her. This was it, the big reveal. Jake wasn't just a guy who liked coffee and gnomes. He was an undercover cop, working secretly to keep the neighborhood safe. Karen thought she was smarter than him, but she'd been outsmarted by a gnome with a camera. Her mean tricks were over, and Jake had won without even raising his voice. How cool is that? Can you believe it all came down to Norman? The neighborhood of Maple Grove was buzzing like a beehive after the big showdown. Karen Baxter, the mean HOA boss, was finally gone. The two guys in dark suits led her away in handcuffs, and she didn't go quietly. "This isn't fair," she yelled. "I have rights. You can't do this." Her voice echoed down the street as they put her in the car. But no one listened anymore. The car door shut, and off she went. Everyone watched, their eyes wide, their mouths smiling. Karen's mean days were over. Jake Miller stood on his porch, cool as ever. His little gnome, Norman, sat in the grass next to him, still wearing that big red hat and goofy grin. Jake waved to the crowd with a friendly hand, like he was saying, "Hey, no big deal." The neighbors couldn't believe it. For months, Karen had bossed them around, telling them what to do with their yards and houses. Now, she was gone, and it was all because of Jake and Norman, too. Things started to change fast. The HOA needed a new leader, and they picked someone totally different. The new person didn't care about silly rules like how tall your grass could be or if you had a gnome in your yard. They just wanted everyone to be happy and get along. People loved that. No more notes on their doors. No more yelling from across the street. Maple Grove felt free again, like a big weight was lifted off everyone's shoulders. Pretty soon, neighbors started walking over to Jake's house. They wanted to say thank you. "Jake, you saved us from her," said Mrs. Thompson, who lived next door. She'd gotten in trouble with Karen for having pink flowers once. "Yeah, you're the best," said little Timmy, who rode his bike nearby. He'd been scared of Karen's mean glare. A bunch of people came by, smiling and shaking Jake's hand. Jake just grinned back and said, "Norman did most of the work." He pointed at the gnome, and everyone laughed. That little guy with the "Mind Your Own Beeswax" sign had turned out to be a hero. But the coolest part? That video Jake showed, the one of Karen scratching cars, went viral. That means it spread all over the internet, and tons of people saw it. Everyone watched Karen sneaking around at night, being mean, and then freaking out when she got caught. They saw Jake standing there, calm and smart, letting the truth come out. People online were amazed. "Whoa, that guy's awesome," they typed. "The gnome caught her? So cool." The video got thousands of likes and shares. Everyone loved seeing Karen's meltdown and Jake's quiet victory. Jake wasn't what people thought. They used to think he was just a lazy guy who didn't care about rules. But now they knew he was a hero. He'd been working undercover, keeping the neighborhood safe, and no one had a clue. Karen thought she could boss him around, but she was so wrong. Jake and Norman showed everyone who she really was, and now Maple Grove was a happier place. The guy they didn't notice before turned out to be the one they all needed. How awesome is that? So, here's the big lesson from this wild story: sometimes the person you think is just there is actually the one with all the power. Karen looked at Jake and saw a guy with a goofy gnome and a chill attitude. She thought he was nothing special. She judged him fast because of Norman and his quiet ways. But wow, was she wrong? Jake had a big secret, and he turned everything around. Karen never saw it coming, and that's what made it so awesome. Maybe next time, she'll stop and think before she starts a fight with someone. Picking on Jake was a huge mistake. What about you? Have you ever thought someone wasn't a big deal, but then they surprised you? Maybe a quiet kid at school turned out to be super smart, or a friend you didn't notice ended up being really brave. It happens all the time. People can be more than they seem. Tell me your stories in the comments. I'm so excited to hear them. This tale with Jake and Norman shows us don't judge too quick. The quiet ones might just be the heroes waiting to shine.